you struggle with binge eating? As a former binge eater and sports nutritionist, I'm going to give you my best piece of advice so you can stop binge eating for good. We're our own harshest critics. We can get so caught up in our own head and think, oh my gosh, we're not losing weight fast enough. If your goal is to lose body fat, we want to do everything that we can to avoid hunger, straight up. You want to be spending most of the year outside of a diet. If you really want to break your binge eating cycle, accepting a little bit of weight gain, but I promise your weight will always drop back down afterwards to its set point. So first and foremost, what we want to do is we want to look at as to why that person is binge eating. Okay, so the number one reason why most people binge eat is because they are restricting. Whether you know it or not, whether it's conscious or subconscious. The reason why you're binging 99% of the time is because you're restricting in some type of way. Most people who binge eat get stuck in the cycle where they feel really bad after a binge, and then they just want to go over exercise, they want to go cut back all of their calories and eat nothing the next day, and then as a result, guess what they do? Then they go and binge eat and eat everything in the cupboard. So first and foremost, the most important thing to do is identify where are you restricting, whether it's overtraining, whether it's under eating, or maybe you're waiting too long before you eat your first meal, or even it's mental restriction, because there's studies around even if you're not physically deprived of food, even just the thought of dieting is going to increase the likelihood of you wanting to binge eat. So where are you restricting, and how can we stop that, and to be able to break that cycle to make sure that you don't binge eat in the first place. The next thing is, let's look at your exercise. And this, once again, kind of goes into identifying where you were restricting. So over-exercising and overtraining is often doing you more harm than good. Because if you're over-exercising, and even if you're eating a good amount of food, if you're doing way more cardio than what you should be, guess what? You're going to be hungry and you're going to be putting yourself in too harsh of a deficit. So have a look at your exercise. A lot of people who are in this cycle and they aren't super aware when it comes to food, they feel the need to over-exercise to get to their goal physique. But chances are you actually don't need to do a whole lot of cardio, or you don't even need to do any cardio for that matter. Have a look at your training, because chances are you really don't need to be doing any kind of cardio whatsoever. Taper that back and see if you can just even implement something small like a step goal that's a lot lower intensity, that's a lot easier to be able to hit, that's not going to make you hungry. Something that I often say with my clients is cardio and running is a really great way of getting yourself hungry quicker, and that's what we want to avoid when we're in a fat loss phase. If your goal is to lose body fat, we want to do everything that we can to avoid hunger, straight up. What do we need to do? We need to implement things that are going to stop making you hungry. And that's doing extra cardio. Because if you think to yourself, okay, I'm gonna go do a really hard group class because that's gonna burn a lot of calories and it's gonna help offset the binge that I had last night, and then you go do that, you burn all these extra calories, and then you get home, you're so hungry, which of course you're gonna be, after burning that amount of calories, your body's gonna wanna replenish that, which is good, it's your body's doing its thing, it's good. But guess what, you're just gonna end up eating those extra calories anyway. So like, what's the point? Like, if you can, the whole goal of wanting to better your physique and improve your physique is we want to basically build muscle. That's what's going to give you the appearance of a leaner physique as a whole. And how we do that is from weight training, progressive overload, not from running on a treadmill, not from going to go to a group class, because you're not going to build the glutes that you want from running on a treadmill. You're not going to build a hourglass shape from doing F45. No hate to F45, love F45, it has a time and place. But we just want to be strategic with your training. Don't overdo the cardio. I know it can be super easy to just want to go try and burn it off, and initially you will have a lot of extra energy after consuming that amount of food. But be smart about it, prioritize weight training, because you're going to look leaner at any given body fat, and chances are you do end up burning even more calories during a weight session, because you're not just burning calories from that weight training session, you're also burning calories for 24 to 48 hours after that session, whereas cardio, you're often only burning calories during that session. So you got to kind of just be smart with your training. Don't over exercise, don't overdo your cardio especially. Make sure that you are having that rest. Otherwise, once again, you're just going to make yourself even hungrier, and then you're just deeper into that binge restrict cycle. And restrict doesn't even necessarily mean coming from food, it can also mean coming from your exercise. Now what do we do? Because you've identified it and you've taken out your cardio, but you still had that urge to restrict. Okay, what are we going to do about it? So something that I get my clients to do if they ever have any kind of tendencies to want to binge eat or to overeat is, instead of thinking and looking at a meal, how can I make this smaller and how can I take things away? Have a look at that meal and think, how can I add to this meal? Okay, so that's the best thing that you can do when you're just wanting to binge eat, because if you're just trying to make your meals as small as possible and they're not very satiating, you really don't have that much protein in there, I would rather you add to a meal and think, how can I make this meal as filling as possible and add extra carbs, add extra protein, add extra healthy fats, so we can make this meal so filling that you do not want to eat anymore after that. Instead of thinking, how can I make this meal smaller to save calories, you want to do the opposite. Think, how can I add to this meal to make it more filling and more satiating for me? So once you start doing that and you're eating more filling meals, I would rather you eat a bigger 1,000 calorie meal that's actually going to fill you up and sustain you throughout the day, so you're not thinking about food, rather than you just trying to get away with eating like a 300 to 400 calorie meal. And then you just end up going to go binge in like an hour, and then you're still thinking about those cookies in the cupboard and you just keep going back. So just have a bigger meal, and that's going to help keep you fuller for longer, so you're not going to want to binge eat. And something as well that can be really common to do when you are in this cycle and then you're trying to break it is you go through what I like to call a little like honeymoon period, and that's where you have that freedom to be able to eat whatever you want. So you're kind of just in this predicament like, oh well, I don't want to restrict, and then you kind of are in this phase where you're just kind of eating like a lot of food all of a sudden, and yeah, you will probably gain a little bit of body fat initially. So with our bodies, we all have a set point weight that we sit really comfortably at. Some people have a higher set point weight, some people have a lower set point weight, and it's a range. It's not an exact weight, but it's generally a range. And think about the weight that you can sit at comfortably, where you're really not restricting, that you're able to live your life, that you feel pretty good at, that you can sustain, where you're not really dieting or bulking, right? So we all have a set point weight. It's really normal after a long period of time of restriction that you actually end up surpassing that set point weight and you end up putting weight on. That's actually a really good thing, especially if you've been restricting for a long period of time, or if you are really lean and you're leaner than what your body's set point is. What your body wants you to do is it wants you to overshoot that set point weight, because your body doesn't know that you're doing this on purpose, right? And they've shown this with so many studies, and they did the study as well. I think it was World War II. The whole purpose of the study was, okay, how can we get these men, after being so incredibly malnourished and who had been starving for so long, eating 1,200 calorie diets, how can we bring them out as healthy as possible to their normal weight after they come back from war? They basically picked these guys who were going to be most inclined to nail the diet in terms of what would be, you know, in the army, and obviously not really eating too much. So they got this group of like 20, 30 men to stick to this diet where it was 1,200 calories. They were eating really plain foods. They all lost so much weight. They all ended up being basically really skinny. They were all normal, healthy body weights, and they all stuck to it. They all had to stick to it. A few of them obviously ended up not even being able to adhere to it, but the ones who did, they got extremely food focused. They were adding so much salt to all their meals. They were studying recipe books. They were thinking that their plain potato with just salt was the best tasting thing on this earth. And once they came out of this restriction point where they were learning how to put back on the weight in a healthy way, they all, 100% of the men, not just gained weight back to their normal weight afterwards, but they all overshot their set point weight, and they gained more weight than where they were even initially before going into it where they were healthy. But over time, they ended up being back at that set point weight. And it's one of my favorite demonstrations to explain what happens, especially if you're someone who's competed in, say, like a bodybuilding competition. Like myself, I coach other bodybuilders to competition. I've competed myself for many years. And we see this across the board for pretty much every single competitor. Now, granted, if your body sits at a lower set point, you're probably not going to have as hard of a time post-comp or post-dieting period than someone who's had to lose 20 kilos or has lost 20 kilos plus, because your body's not gonna want you to just gain 20 kilos after that dieting phase. It's gonna want you to gain like 25, 30 for it to feel really safe, to make sure that you're not gonna restrict it again, because your body is still in like a scared point where it wants to overshoot, just in case you do go through a period of time where you're without food. It's your body doing a really good thing at the end of the day, and it can be really easy to think, oh, why does my body want this food? It's actually protecting you to be able to survive, you know, in periods of time if you physically had no access to food. We just live in a day and age where we do want to improve our physique, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's ways to go about it. However, I think it's really important for you to understand that if you have been through a long period of time of restricting yourself with food and you've lost a lot of body weight, that chances are, if you let yourself, and if you really want to break your binge eating cycle, accepting a little bit of weight gain, but I promise your weight will always drop back down afterwards to its set point. In terms of how long it takes, everyone is so different, and it honestly just depends in terms of what your set point is and how long that you've been dieting for. The bigger the diet, chances are the harder your rebound. And I myself, being a sports nutritionist, personal trainer, online coach, someone who's been working in this industry for over 10 years, I can tell you right now, there are still ways where you can diet down and achieve your physique in a way that actually is sustainable, that you're not going to want to binge, that you can actually sustain the results, but you have to do things slowly. You can't be, the second that you feel any kind of need to want to binge or to overeat, or your food focus heightens, we either straight away, we stop there, we implement a diet break or refeed day, or we start building up your calories back up. So I wanted to share that example with you regarding the study and set point, because I think it's something that a lot of people don't realize. They think, oh, I lost a lot of weight during that challenge, I'm going to go do it again because it works for you. Well, if it works for you, why do you need to lose 10 kilos again? You know, why do you need to go do the challenge again if it works for you? If it really works for you, you wouldn't have to go do it again, because it's sustainable, right? There is no point doing a diet if it's not sustainable, unless of course you're dieting for something particular, like a bodybuilding show, or even like a wedding. If you want to be feeling a little bit like particularly lean for that, okay, that's fine. There can be a time and place where you might be doing something unsustainable, but everything needs to be strategic. I think a lot of people go wrong because they're doing things that aren't strategic for them. They really have no exact guidance or game plan or a reason why with what they're doing, and then they go wrong because they're just restricting too hard. They lose some weight, and then all of a sudden their food focus increases, their ghrelin hormone increases, the leptin decreases, and then they just want to go eat everything inside and think, oh my god, there's something wrong with me because I'm just not disciplined enough. Or actually no, physiologically your body is wired to make sure that you stay at that set point weight, because that's where your body feels happy and most comfortable at. And there's, like I said, there's things that we can do, like gaining muscle and going through our cut and build phases slowly and over time to ensure that we can be able to sustain that. However, we need to, once again, have a game plan, which is why I'm so big on working with a coach and having someone in that second set of eyes, because I get it, we're our own harshest critics. We can get so caught up in our own head and think, oh my gosh, we're not losing weight fast enough, or, average rule of thumb that I like to tell all my clients is 2 weeks out of 4 weeks of a month is when we actually see those low weights. Even if you're 100% adherent, your weight's going to fluctuate, but that's why we like to track those averages over time so we can collect that data and see. But if it's just you looking at that, it can be so easy to get caught up in, and that you just want to slash your calories really quickly, and then all of a sudden, guess what? You're in that binge restrict cycle, wondering why it doesn't work for you and that you can't gain muscle. Of course you can't, because you're restricting yourself so hard that you're not prioritizing your protein. You end up ruining your metabolism, and that when you do go end up to binge, it's like you're not binging on protein, you're of course binging on fats and carbohydrates, which aren't necessarily the healthy kind. So your metabolism's in a bad place, you've been restricting for so long, you've lost muscle, because when you diet too hard, you're going to lose muscle, you've lost a lot of strength, and then in return, your physique ultimately looks worse. You're left off with a worse metabolism than where you started, and that when you start building, you're not even happy with yourself because you haven't got that muscle to begin with, and you've lost your strength. Like, you're just not in a good position physique-wise, which is why I always say as well, you shouldn't be dieting 365 days a year. You want to be spending most of the year behavior outside of a diet. Having those structured phases is so incredibly important. So guys, just to summarize all those 3 points that I mentioned there. First and foremost, identify where you're restricting, and we want to stop that. Step 2, make sure that you're not over exercising, and especially we don't want to be over doing your cardio. Start off small and only use cardio as a extra tool as needed. And step 3, instead of thinking, how can I make this meal smaller? Think, how can I add to this meal to make it more satiating and filling? And then of course, I'm always going to plug my coaching, which is work with a coach, because I know the value in it and it's what I do on a day-to-day basis, and you'll grow so much further having an expert in your team. You know, we hire experts in every other area of our life. Why aren't you doing it with your fitness? If you're struggling, work with a coach. I'm genuinely not saying this to just plug my coaching either, but like any coach, as long as they're good, please do your research, because it's so important, because there are a lot of bad coaches out there, and a lot of coaches who don't understand this, who hasn't even been through it themselves, and they will just slash your calories really, really low, and that once again you're in that awful cycle and thinking, why can't I stick to this? And then they get angry at you for not sticking to it, when you're like, oh sorry, is there something wrong with me? And then you're feeling like it's your fault. No, we don't want that. So just work with a coach, please do your research, and if you are interested in coaching and you want to go to someone you can trust, feel free to DM me on Instagram at Templin Fitness. We do have a team of coaches at Team Absolute Athlete. Check us out on Instagram, and we can get you started with a coach who is right for you. But anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.